This is the How to Write Funny podcast. I'm Scott Dickers. Today I'm with Kevin Avery, stand-up comic and staff writer for Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. So Kevin, how did you get started in comedy?
I kind of grew up an addict to stand-up. So it'd been with me like all my life. And when I was old enough to start going to comedy clubs, I would just hang out there. There were two comedy clubs where I grew up in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And so I grew up in San Jose. There were two clubs there that I would hang out at regularly. A club called Rooster Teeth Feathers. That was in Sunnyvale, California. And there was another one called The Last Laugh, I think. And I would just go and sit and watch those guys. And
how old a kid were you at this point?
Oh, I was like 20, 21,
Okay.
Well, yeah, probably like throughout college I would go. So when I'd come back home for the summer. So 18 to like 21, 22 on into my, grown man years. At some point the owner of, and I would get to, on a good night, I would get to hang out with some of the comics and stuff. So the owner of Roosters, she at the time, she saw me hanging out all the time. And I was a big dork. I would call and make a reservation for one. Like I was like, I have to make a reservation, I guess. And they were laughing at me the whole time. And it's Kevin, but the woman who owned it, who's since passed, Jessica Jenkins, she sort of became a comedy mother to me, and it got to a point where she would just bring me over and introduce me to the comics, and at some point she was like, so when are you gonna do it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you weren't doing open mics, you were just kind of a groupie.
I was just basically. And but it was, I'd gone from listening to records, my parents' old, whatever, Pryor and Cosby and Flip Wilson records, to watching comedy on television as much as I could. I have a tape of me, an old VHS tape. I'm dating myself, but it was of me performing in a talent show, and maybe the only one of like that type of thing I had. And I erased over it so that I could record an episode of like A&E's Evening at the Improv or something like that. Like that was how I was like, oh man, it's Friday. I don't have a free videotape. And so I remember it's a tape of me from the seventh grade, and it's gone. It's gone now because I wanted to see Bobby Slayton. Yeah.
So that's a commitment. You're into this.
Yeah. And so she sort of prodded me and was like, when are you going to do this? And I always acted like, oh, what are you talking about? And she's like, we see you hanging out back here all the time. And
now let me ask you this. Were you thinking you would do it at some point, or were you really just a fan?
No, stand-up was something I always wanted to do, but never thought I actually would do. And then at some point, I think when I was like 17 or 18, I was like, let me do this. Let me start writing some stuff. And I bought some books, and I started trying to write jokes, and they were terrible. And
so these books are like Comedy Comes in Threes and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, stuff like there was this one book. It was like a comedy activity book. I think I loaned it to somebody actually now, and I need to get it back. But
like a workbook?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Okay.
I just remember it was like a former writer from one of Bob Hope's writers or something like that.
Great.
And then those
guys were good.
Yeah,
those Bob Hope. I mean, they really knew how to craft a joke.
Yeah. So that was the thing that attracted me to that book. Is like I think it was just like, oh, this is going to teach me sort of solid joke writing. And I still didn't get it. And I just sort of read those books, and people say you don't need to read books, you just go up and do it. And that's true. I did get something out of, a little something out of those books, I think. And just the notion that, you're not gonna be good. And this was one of the most important lessons I could have learned before going up, is that your job is not to go up there and make people laugh. Your job is to get out what you want to say.
That's good advice. And that was in one of the books.
Yeah, that was in Judy's, I'll have to go, if I had my phone, I would just look it up. But that was really, really valuable because it took away so much pressure from my first time. I mean, I was still nervous the first time I went up, but I just was like, I have these things and I just want to say them. And I assumed that I was not going to be good. I assumed that I would not get laughs. And I was like, that's fine, because the next time I'll get a little bit better and a little bit better. But so, yeah, this comedy club owner kind of tricked me into, going up for the first time. And she, in front of another comedian, she was like, when are you going to do this? When are you going to? And I was like, I'm going to do it. And she goes, well, open mic is in 2 weeks. Next one. Okay. And the guy, the comedian was Troy Thurgill from Portland. And I remember he kind of talked to me about it. And then as we were leaving, he's like, so you going to do it? I was like, yeah, I'll do it, man. And, that sort of, all right, I'll see you later, so one of these days. And he looked at me and he goes, don't say you're going to do it if you're not going to do it. And I was just like, oh, jeez. And so I had 2 weeks to rally and write, 5 minutes.
That's how much they gave you, 5 minutes?
Yeah, which turned out to be 10 or 12 apparently, because they just let me go.
Wow.
I went on at the end of the night, and I ended up having a very good set. And but again, I wasn't some comedy whiz kid. I'd started to write, and then I would go, yeah, I'm gonna do it, and then I'd back away. I'd get scared, and then I would try to do it again and write some more, and those 2 times that I did that, they were just terrible jokes. And finally, the third time, I had sort of figured out how I wanted to write for myself. And Bring the Pain had come out with Chris Rock and Dana Carvey's special. And I watched those, and I was like, oh, this is how I want to do it. This is what these guys are doing. And so that gave me a lot of direction in how to perform and what I wanted to do with my material.
Yeah, so what was your process for writing the jokes? Did you have things you wanted to say and then you used what you learned from those books to craft the jokes, or did you have some other method? And were you thinking about your comedy persona at that point, or were you just flying blind, sort of?
By the time I actually started doing it, the books were just out the window. Okay. I was like, but I had a very specific process, and that was that I had made some notes about a topic and sort of what was funny about the topic, maybe a joke or a funny thought. And then when I had a handful of things, I would sit down, and one at a time I would sort of do a stream of consciousness on those ideas. Maybe it's just a couple of pages, maybe it's like 4 or 5 pages, and it's just a mess, but you go through there and you find the stuff that's funny in there and go, okay,
handwritten?
I would type it all out.
Okay.
And it's funny, like leading up to my first time, I had this day job. I was a technical writer, and I did that for a long time and just hated it. And I didn't know anything about the tech industry or how any of that stuff worked. I had essentially conned my way into this job. And
this is like talking about Silicon Valley, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was just to me it was just a day job, and I got fired several times, many times actually. Huh. And so I was just miserable there. But I would at the job I had at the time, I would leave at like 4. And then come back around 6:37. I'd go take a nap or go to a movie, come back when everyone was gone and sit in a conference room and just write throughout the night. And yeah, just a stream of consciousness. And eventually I'd go back to that and go, all right, what do I find funny here? And then craft the jokes out of those little pieces. Maybe you just find 1 or 2, maybe you find a bunch.
Did you let those sit for a while before going back and looking at them, or did you look at them right away?
I mean, eventually, yeah, I had the luxury of being able to do that. I mean, when I first started, I was like, I got 2 weeks. But right. Sometimes I would. I don't know. I was pretty anxious to get a new thing out there when I was first doing that. So, I figured I'm going to figure it out on stage one way or another. Usually what would happen is if I had a thought and I wrote it down, I might wait a while before I started writing on it. And then I could look at that and go, oh no, that's not funny. And I would just sort of abandon it right there. But once I started writing on a thing, if I saw something that I thought was funny or that was a joke, I went ahead and tried that as quickly as I could.
Got it.
Yeah.
What kind of comedians were you seeing at the clubs? Were they kind of local guys, or was it touring comics that would come through and stuff like that?
It was both. I mean, you had so there was, San Jose is 40 something miles south of San Francisco. And so once I started doing it, I started going to San Francisco, several nights a week, hanging out there, doing, open mics, and the big Sunday, the showcase that you would go to was on Sunday at the Punchline. That was sort of there were two like A clubs in San Francisco, Cobb's Comedy Club and the Punchline. But the Punchline was on Sunday nights, that was sort of the epicenter of San Francisco comedy. And so that's where you'd see all the local guys, all the local powerhouses. And then, yeah, I would drop in on weeknights or weekends when, so-and-so headliner was there and watch those guys. And because and at Roosters, I would end up, they put me to work pretty quickly at that club. And so I got
gave you paying slots
within a few months.
Okay.
I mean, Roosters was very, I waited till I didn't start till I was 26. And so, so I was always frustrated with how late I started, but things really sort of escalated quickly for me. And so, yeah, in a few months, they were paying me to open. And within a year, I think they were featuring me there. They were middling me.
Wow, you were a coiled spring.
I guess so. I was
prep.
Yeah, and so the funny it was a slightly slower process at like the bigger clubs, but the one thing I remember going in on a Sunday and they introduced me to the guy who ran that showcase, and his name was Hutch, and he was like, I don't know who he thought he saw, but they introduced me to him, and he's like, yeah, well, you know the deal. You hang out in about 6 months, and then we will put you up. If you do well, put you in the rotation. All right, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I've seen you hanging around here for a few months, though. And I was like, okay, sure. He hadn't. I don't know who he saw, but it wasn't me. But I was like, I'll take it. And so he put me up fairly early, and then, next thing you know, a fallout occurred, and they were like, well, what about Kevin Avery? And so that got me into their working rotation pretty quickly. And so things happen, pretty rapidly for me when I started.
So then once you're a headliner and you've got all these paying gigs in San Francisco, do you have big ambitions then for what's next, or are you kind of riding the gravy train?
Well, I mean, that's the weird thing, because in San Francisco, you can really get stuck. I think in any comedy scene, you can get stuck in your scene. And so, I kind of just lived as like a middle act for a long time. And there was a thing going on where we were kind of doing comedy in a vacuum. The boom of the 80s had been gone, and the early 90s. And so we were all just up there like, well, no one's paying attention to us. And, these Aspen showcases and these Montreal showcases would happen. And I remember people kind of waltzing into these shows, comics, just so cavalier, like, all right, what set should I do tonight? And now you would prepare for, weeks, your Montreal audition or what. Yeah. And so
TV execs are going to see you and all that.
Yeah. But at the time we were like, this is a paid vacation for someone just who wants to come to San Francisco for a weekend.
Yeah.
And so, we just, I got very comfortable, and it wasn't until like the sort of, I don't know, the alternative things started to happen, and then and that sort of turned people's attention back to comedy, that I had to think, well, what else, what am I doing with this, or it wasn't even that like clear. It was just sort of like one day, someone asked me to be in a video that they were shooting. And at the time, there was a web series boom. That was the thing that was happening. And, companies like Crackle were giving out deals and all this. And
late 90s, are we talking about? Or?
Yeah. Early aughts, whatever. And And so someone asked me to be in their video. I was like, yeah, sure. And, and I was an actor. And, I did it and I was like, oh yeah, I love doing it. I like writing my own stuff, and I like making my own like videos or shorts or being in my own stuff, so the wake up call and sort of the goal suddenly became, yeah, keep doing comedy, but it's not just a matter of like, okay, someday I'm gonna jump from hosting to feature, and then one day I'm gonna be the headliner. That's what it was initially, but you start to realize it's bigger than that, I guess, or it can be, depending on what you want. And so, yeah, my focus sort of became about creating my own stuff while I was still doing stand up, and because it was weird. I jumped to like middle or feature, and then I kind of just was there for a long time, and I struggled a lot with writing and taking chances on my stand up, and so there was a period where I just kind of rested on, I'm doing great. I was comfortable as a performer, so I knew San Francisco teaches you how to kill. It doesn't teach you how to do a short TV set or anything like that. It teaches you how to go up and you go on these, one-nighter runs, and you learn how to build an act and stuff like that. And so, you could get stuck doing the same stuff over and over again just because you're addicted to these laughs that you're getting without thinking beyond that. And that happened to me. That definitely happened to me. But I luckily at the same time was sort of trying to create my own content and write, whether it was screenplays or short films or things like that.
Did you have some sort of like creative writing focus in college, or did you excel at that in high school, or did you come from that in some way?
Well, that was something that I always did. Just growing up, I always liked writing. I loved the idea of creating something. It sounds really cheesy, I know, but
it is amazing. It's not there, and then it's there.
And I love the idea of a story. When I was in the 4th grade, I remember this kid, Greg Kelly. He wrote this story about a carrot, and the carrot's journey from, I guess getting picked in the, carrot patch or whatever it is, and the man being on the truck and the manufacturing, the whole deal. And it's a story about a carrot, and I just remember being enthralled, like, oh my God, what this carrot's journey, this is amazing. And I don't know what it was, but there was something about that just the idea of a carrot, sort of walking with a character on their journey, and whatever, all that mumbo jumbo. But I and so I wrote as much as I could, and yeah, that just I took a creative writing class, here or there, maybe in high school and in college, but there was no, like, I went to Tuskegee University. There was barely a theater program there, and so I just sort of did it when I could, and try to do that. Try to do it as much as possible, I guess.
So how do you suppose you got interested in the funny aspect of, storytelling?
Well, that's the crazy thing, because that I was always interested in that, and when I I will never understand. I think as a kid, I really had trouble. I was a smart kid, but I really had trouble grasping, I guess, putting together some of the simplest concepts. There were things. I have a picture that I drew like in the 1st or 2nd grade, and I would look at it, and look, when you're in the 1st grade, you draw your picture. What you draw looks crazy, but even then, there were characters from Star Wars, and I drew these things and these people, and I'm looking at them, I was like, what is missing? There's something not right about this, And I was looking at him, and the head and the legs and the arms and stuff like that. Nobody had torsos. I just drawn legs, arms, and a head on top of those. But I was like, what am I not getting there? And so with comedy, I was listening to these records as a kid. I was watching these people on TV, and I just thought, man, I would love to do that, but I never could. Well, meanwhile, in school, when I would be assigned to write a story, occasionally you write it and they want you to read it for the class, they were always funny stories. And I wasn't the class clown, but I was definitely the kid who, like, Kevin's going to read a story and it's going to be funny. So I was doing stand-up without realizing it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the comedians you mentioned, like Cosby, Pryor, they're storytelling comedians, and I've seen your act, and you're doing more like traditional modern stand-up gag-based stuff. It's not really storytelling.
Yeah.
Do you see that as storytelling in a way, like doing gags and bits?
Well, yes and no. I mean, like, I'm thinking back to my older stuff. There was a point where I realized that I was doing more storytelling. But yeah, traditionally my stuff has been like, so this happened to me, and blah blah blah, and set up and punch and all that stuff. And I think some of it, and maybe it's because I got lazy with the writing, just went into, let me just talk about this on stage and see what happens. Not and that's work in and of itself. I mean, there are comedians who really do that and are very good at it. And you could see them sort of crafting a bit and evolving, a story evolving. But I think at some point I kind of became a little bit more of a storyteller. I certainly don't, like, for instance, I was very physical, my first, for a long time. And
you do a lot of, body movement and stuff that, some comedians don't really go there.
Yeah, I do less of that now. Okay. I'm just and I also do less comedy now because of the show and the job and everything. And so that kind of can be all consuming. So I don't get to write as much. I could go out every night if I wanted to. I mean, it would kill me. It would be exhausting. Yeah. But I'm reluctant to do that because I don't get to write as much, and I don't want to just go out and do the same thing repeatedly. And so, which is ironic because for a long time in my younger comedy years, I got very used to doing that. But so now when I do go out, yeah, a lot of it is let me tell you this thing that happened to me, or talking my way through a story and trying to find the bits in that. But yeah, I don't know. I feel closer to that style of comedy now, the storytelling, than I did before. Definitely before.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You kind of had to get there through a process where first you started with the simpler gags.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, the thing that I learned is that how to kind of find yourself. I'm reluctant to use the term your voice because I think that's a different thing. But I mean, no, maybe it's the same. Like, at one point, I was sort of experimenting with the bits that they did feel a little alty, or they felt a little. I remember doing bits that I thought, this sounds like something Nick Swartzen would do, and I'm like, I'm not Nick, and I'm a big fan of Nick's, and I think he's hilarious, but I found myself sort of playing around with things and conventions and styles and I don't even know that maybe I was just emulating those guys without realizing it, some of these different comics. But at one point I was like, why isn't this working? Why isn't, and then I was like, oh, you're not doing you're kind of doing your version of somebody else. And it's not, it wasn't completely natural. It didn't totally fit, and it took a while to figure that out. And I'm still sort of figuring it out, what I can do, if there's a limit to what I can do and what that is, or if there are no limits, if I could just, all right, man, we'll try that now and we'll make that work somehow. But
yeah. So let's talk about how you got into TV writing,
Mm-hmm.
which is what you're doing now, much more than stand-up. How did that develop from where you were at in San Francisco?
Well, so Kamau Bell and he's the comic that came up with me in San Francisco, and at some point we decided let's start writing together.
You were peers?
Yeah.
Okay.
And and so I think we just realized why aren't we doing this? I think you hear, a lot of people say, well, I want to write, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to work on this project, or and we were like, what if we just really did it? And I'd written a screenplay, maybe two, no, just one, I think, at that point. And so, we started just kind of working on each other's acts. And then we decided, let's write something super basic and simple and like that would be cheap, like kind of a dumb comedy. And
you were thinking movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the idea we had was he was a nanny at the time. And I remember asking him, hey man, we're gonna go out to such and such, you wanna roll? And he's like, nah, I can't, man, I got the baby tonight, I can't do that,
That's already funny.
Well, and then we just riffing off that. We're like, yeah, cut to us at the club with the baby and the whole, and it was dumb jokes, but
right.
But we had been talking about writing together, and he called me a day or two later. He's like, look, we really got to do this writing thing. I think we really should sit down and write this script, whatever we want it to be. And I go, yeah, I agree. He goes, but I think it really has to be that thing about the baby. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, man, trust me. It's at the time we were watching How High. The movie come on, a friend of ours had worked on it and was in it, Dwayne Kennedy. And I hadn't met Dwayne yet, but, he pointed to that like, somebody greenlit this. Let's go to work, man. And so I was like, well, I can't argue with that. And so, and we were big Red Man and Method Man fans. So we literally just took a model and we were like, let's try to make one of our own. And it was just this silly, dumb concept about these two guys who were these two like street level sort of hoods who were, it's something crazy, like, they had accidentally stolen some diamonds from the mob and they had to hide out, but then they got, with the place where they went to hide out, they got mistaken for nannies and they had to take care of a baby, and wackiness ensued. And so we literally wrote it for Method Man and Rhett. We just had them in mind. And the more of those we worked on and wrote together, the more they became infused with our own sense of humor, so that it was beyond just a silly concept. We could really make something like this funny. And eventually he got his, he sold. In fact, we were submitting to TV shows as like writing partners for a little bit, and we almost got hired on D.L. Hughley had a show on CNN, and we were they were gonna offer us a job, and then the bottom dropped out of the economy, and suddenly everyone's budgets froze, and so no dice.
Did you guys have agents or managers that you got out of? So you're doing this without those people?
We were doing that. Yeah, we didn't have any rep at the time.
How did you get your stuff seen or sent out?
Well, with the screenplays, we just sort of wrote them, and then we're like, okay, well, this is registered, put it away, and I sent it to the WGA, and they'll register your thing for $25 or $50, whatever it is,
yep.
And get a certificate. But we knew a guy, this comedian Kevin Kataoka, who there were comedians who really encouraged us to keep writing, keep doing this. And that's why I always tell people you have to get with like-minded individuals, because they're going to egg you on, or they're going to go, I know a guy who's looking for so-and-so. And that's what happened. Kevin put us in touch with the guy he knew who was and just sort of it turned into that thing. And so that got our script to D.L. Hughley's people. And Kevin was he was an experienced TV writer.
So you'd send your screenplays to these people and say, we're a writing team, and try to get considered for their TV show.
Yeah, well, we would write stuff for them. So with DL, we submitted an actual packet.
Got it, okay.
We submitted sketches to Chappelle. We both had worked for Chappelle a lot and opened for him a lot, and so we knew him and Neil Brennan, and kind of, hey, we got these.
Slip them the script,
yeah. Yeah, and they weren't necessarily great, but we were just trying to get our stuff out there. And so what starts to happen is people know that you do this, and they go, hey, Wanda Sykes is staffing for a show, maybe you should submit to that. And that just became a priority for us to do. And then he got his show. Kamau sold a show to FX, totally biased, with W. Kamau Bell.
Yep.
And brought me on board. I still had to submit. I didn't believe that I had the job until officially someone called me and said, yeah, you have to move to New York in 2 weeks.
Now, was that weird? You guys were working together and then he got a show on his own?
No, because we, our paths, we are two totally different comedians, and our paths kind of really went in different directions.
You had other lives besides your work together.
It was frustrating as from a collaboration thing, because we were working together on writing projects less and less, but he was really kind of doing his thing. I was working on these videos and trying to make short films and stuff like that, and he had developed the Kamau Bell curve and was taking that on the road, and that was getting popular, and that's sort of where the show sprang from. And Chris Rock saw it and said, let's make a TV show. And so no, it wasn't weird. It was, we were such close friends, it was sort of understood, well, it's whoever gets it first, yeah, so he got the show. It was like, great. We'd been doing it so long that I think there was never a moment where we were like, woo, and popped the champagne. I remember he called me, he was like, well, looks like we sold the show to FX. And I was like, I was in my car too. I was in LA at the time, and I was like, all right, guess we'll see what happens. Like, it was weird. We had this bizarre inability to sort of enjoy what should come out of it. But I think we'd been at it for so long that we'd all seen the start and stop of it all. And so we were like, all right, yeah.
People outside of the entertainment business often have a hard time understanding that. It's such a process, and it takes so long. And there's so many, starts and stops. There's never a moment to like celebrate. Hey, we made it, because it's just such a long, slow haul.
Well, you do that early on. There were definitely, I've had definite moments where I was, dancing in the streets because this happened, or, oh, I'm getting the gig opening for Chappelle. I remember in the early days that happened a lot more. And now I'm just more grounded about everything. I am still in awe of all of it as it happens. I'm a big showbiz fan. Just outside of wanting to do this as a career, one of my idols is Sammy Davis Jr. And so, like, I loved living in Los Angeles because I loved being around there's the douchebaggery that is like, oh, I don't need to see this. But there's something about driving past a movie studio I kind of enjoy all of that. And, but at the same time, work-wise and career-wise, I'm very cautious with my emotions when it comes to that.
Yeah, because it's like there's glamour there, and you feel it when you drive by a movie studio.
Yeah.
But you rarely experience glamour when you're doing the work.
No, it's not glamorous at all.
There's not a lot of glamour.
You don't, I learned very early on that the thing you think you want to do most, when you start doing it, it's gonna really test you and make you think you don't want to do it. And I remember when I started doing theater in college, and it was the first time I felt like I was doing real acting. And I had this director who, John Arthur House, I'll never forget this guy. He was a great director. Loved the theater, knew the theater, but he was, yelling at us, and he was a hardcore theater director. And, I remember thinking, this is acting? Oh, no, I'm not doing this. And I really didn't want to do it. And I couldn't believe it, because all my life I'd wanted to be an actor. And I was like, well, if this is what this guy's yelling at me, and so I think everything I've ever done that I've wanted to do has sort of tested me in that way. You write a lot of things that you don't want to write for a long time. And then you get to write the things you do like to write, and you get to see the result of that. As a comedian, you do gigs that you're like, why am I in the middle of nowhere in this hotel? I was telling a story the other day about being in a hotel somewhere in Oregon, and reaching over to turn the lamp on, and the lamp just collapsed on the table. And I was like, yeah, comedy, I guess. Welcome to, whatever, Medford, Oregon, or wherever I was at the time,
That's
so.
the closest you get to glamour.
Yeah,
In Medford,
for a
Oregon.
long time. But there is an element, a rock star element to it. You're young and I'm on the road and I'm going to go to this town and then tomorrow it's this and then I'm going to and so that's exciting too. It's just the reality is, oh, okay, there's 8 people here at the Winter's Inn in Winnemucca and I don't and the staff doesn't seem to like me and I don't know if I'll live through the night.
So what was it like working on Totally Biased? Was that just a different thing for you, being on that kind of grind?
It was it was great. It was this fantasy because it was my first TV writing job. I remember the first day going into work, I on the elevator up to whichever floor, I think we were on the 12th floor or something, and the elevator would not move fast enough for me. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to see what does the office look like, or what is this going to be like when and who are the other writers? I didn't know who all the other writers were going to be. So it was this great experience, and I feel like we put this thing together that was this sort of little TV show that FX really believed in, and Chris Rock wanted to see really work, and Kamau was excited about this was a culmination of. He really had to turn his direction around comedically for this to come about. And we went on a sort of diverting a little bit, but we went on a road trip we went on a tour of Japan, a military tour to Okinawa, and it was a grind. So much so that he was like he just stopped doing stand-up for a good month or two. And that's where the W. Kamau Bell curve came from. And he sort of rejiggered his act and sort of said, no, this is what I really want to do. And so he really made a commitment to his voice and the direction he wanted. And so that's where this show came from. So there was all that for him. And it was hard work, but I was so excited to learn. And that's the thing I was like, I'm going to learn how to really do this. It's exciting that Chris would show up and hang out like 2 or 3 times a week, and so I felt like I learned a lot in a really short amount of time, and it was weird though because we were trying to figure it out, and so it was a little bit frustrating because it wasn't already this well-oiled machine. I wasn't going to write for Colbert at the time, or whatever TV show. So there were growing pains on that show.
And it wasn't your voice either; it was his, and it was a kind of a different kind of social issues based humor that maybe you hadn't had a lot of experience in.
Yeah, I mean, as his friend, this is I'm well aware of all these things, and as a black comedian myself, there were certain things obviously that I was aware of and that were important to me. That wasn't necessarily part of my act, what I had done as a stand-up coming up, but I was all about kind of writing that and getting my hands dirty with, politics or whatever, social issues. And so that never, I don't think that ever really felt like, oh God, I gotta write this again, it became it just, was part of what we did. And it's where I learned to write jokes. That was the most important part to me. It was, Chris Rock yelling at us one night that it was like the 3rd or 4th show. And we were all celebrating, every show. Oh, we did it! Another week down, woo! And I remember Chris standing in one of the doorways talking to like 2 or 3 writers. And I was like, oh, what's Chris talking about? And I walked over there, and he's sort of yelling at them like, you guys aren't writing enough jokes. There aren't enough jokes in the show. You're not doing that. And I was like, oh God. And suddenly I realized everyone's faces were just kind of like, ugh. Like I had stepped in a whole minefield that I kind of didn't want to. But I'm sitting there listening to him, And I'm like, and everyone's like, oh boy, okay, I thought we did something good, but whatever. And I just remember thinking, well, maybe we aren't writing enough jokes. And maybe what we thought are jokes are just sort of softballs and not really, and so that became my focus, is to go, well, what is a joke and what's not a joke? And I really felt like I learned a lot in that period, that sort of 6-month period of the beginning of the show.
Yeah, that's great. And then how did that lead to your work on John Oliver's show?
So it's so Totally Biased. In our second season, we ended up getting canceled, and I came back to LA for the holidays, and just because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, and I did not submit to Oliver. Oliver was looking, and I think the Daily Show was also looking for writers, and I think even correspondents. But Totally Biased had gone from a weekly show to a nightly show, and that kind of was a difficult transition, to say the least. And so I think it was just, I came back, I was exhausted and kind of shell shocked from the whole thing, and I could not get it together I think I'd written a submission packet to Best Week Ever. I had a meeting with them very quickly after I heard after Totally Biased was officially canceled.
That's still in New York.
That was in New York. So when I came back to LA, I was just waiting to hear if I had gotten the job, and I did, but I was also like, well, there are these other shows, and I would love to write for them, but I just couldn't get it together to submit. That I was just like, I got the Best Week Ever, great, good, I'm done. And so I went to work for them, and it was great, and it was different, and I was like, okay, because at that point I had kind of become overwhelmed and kind of the politics and also I wasn't doing on Totally Biased, I wasn't really doing writing anymore. I had been promoted to the head writer really fairly quickly, and so everything I was learning, I was almost like I was unlearning it a little bit, which was very frustrating. But then I was sort of learning something else, and
As head writer, were you just reviewing what the other writers were doing and saying yes or no?
yeah, I was delegating. I was managing the group. It was a weird dynamic though, because there was Kamau, there was myself, and there was the showrunner, and between the three of us, my job was more directly like just dealing with the writers, and well, this is what they need, this is what we want, this is what and then getting what they had and calling that and going, here, what do you think of this? But so that was tricky because it was the opportunity of a lifetime. 6 months into my first job, and I get this head writing gig. That was a weird. It was again like when I started stand up, and things just it's sort of like when you make a wrong turn and your GPS goes recalculating, and it sort of catches you up, or whatever. Yeah. And so that the Totally Biased thing became, that it was hard because it was a nightly show. I had all this other responsibility, and I came out of that, went to Best Week, and that was just like fresh air. Oh, we just have to talk about Justin Bieber, but then because it's a pop culture show, but then it took no time at all to be like, are we talking about Justin Bieber again? Like right. So that was a little bit frustrating. And then the Oliver people called, and they were like, hey, we're looking. We heard you're the head writer of this other show. And my agent was like, you want to submit? Sure. What do I got, 2 weeks to put something together? He's like, you got 2 days. And I was like, okay. And so I whipped something together, and that's how I ended up there. I met with them, and fairly quickly, it just turned around. And so.
And then you were there at the beginning, so you were able to help formulate what that show is, right?
Yeah.
So what did you bring to that from your W. Kamau Bell experience and all the other stuff that you had done? Or were you just trying to figure out, this is John Oliver's voice, we got to figure out what his tone is?
Yeah, I think it was really more that because, I think he hired me because he went, well, this guy's different from this person, and this writer is different from her, and she's different from her. And so, I mean, I'm more of a sillier performer, a sillier sort of sketch person. And I'm not, there's a guy who is heavily into politics and foreign policy and knows all that shit, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I can sit down and go, what's this? All right, and go. I remember the first week I was there, we were having a writers meeting, and John's there, and Tim Carvel, the showrunner, and someone makes a joke about Mitch McConnell, and I'd heard the name, and I knew who Mitch McConnell was, but I could not think of who Mitch McConnell was. It wasn't like they said, I don't know, name any. Now I'm just blanking. If they had said Beyonce, obviously all of us would have, that Beyonce lady. But I had to search my brain, and they're all laughing at some joke, and I'm like, yeah, Mitch McConnell, we're gonna get him, and so I had to go and like, who the hell is Mitch McConnell? Like, I forgot who he is, So, there were a lot of things there that I had to go sit down and do the research for and figure out, but that was the job, and I knew I could do that, and I wasn't afraid of doing that. But for us, I think the job it really was just focused on finding not John's voice as much as what we wanted the show to be.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant. Because the show really did become something very unique, where he doesn't just do sort of daily show spins on the 24-hour news cycle. He's actually really explaining issues that are important that people don't know about, and then having calls to action, which is really unique. Curious to know how that came about.
I think that really came from a place of, it's about the angle of the piece and I mean the comedic angle. And then what can we land on? What's the big joke that we can land on? I ultimately can't speak for John or the show even. But I do know that, I think of early pieces like the net neutrality thing, where we were like, what would be the funniest thing we could do here? Oh, tell all the internet trolls to go flood the site. No one was like, and this is going to get them. No, he just was like, this would be funny.
You're going for the comedy.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think all of these shows are comedy shows, whether it's Totally Biased, Daily Show, Colbert. They're all, The Nightly Show. They're all, their job is to make the comedy.
They have to get laughs first.
Yeah, people like to say, no, you're journalists, but journalism's been done. Because that's what happens. You hear people go, no one's reporting this. No one's talking about this. Well, yeah, no, we're taking a bunch of clips from shows that have been talking about this and putting them on our show. We're just making jokes about them. So I know as a comedy writer, that's what I brought to the table. That's what all these other writers brought to the table. What would be the funniest thing we could do here? And I think that's what happens. In terms of the evolution of the show, it was just, we can do this thing or we can not do that thing. We can do an interview or not do an interview. And so I think little by little, it evolved very rapidly, but it definitely felt like an evolution. Like it was not a left turn. Like, that's it. No more interviews. We just, we don't have to do that if we don't want to. And so we didn't, for a while. And then every once in a while, let's get someone over there. Bring out the desk and,
Right, cool. So you're in the thick of it now. You're on the treadmill with the show. This may be difficult to answer, but I'm curious to know, do you see yourself getting back to stand-up? Do you envision a way to get the ideas that are yours and like your persona and your voice out there in a way that you haven't before on TV, so you're not writing for another person? Over the years, you've been such a focused, hard worker in comedy. And it all started with this desire to sort of get your ideas out there. But now, for a lot of these first few years in the entertainment industry, you've been serving other people with your vision. And I'm just curious to know what you think about when you think about, like, what's the idealized version of your career where you're actually getting to say what you want to say.
Yeah,
as you.
Yeah, like stand-up is not a thing that I could ever. I'm terrified of becoming the writer who used to do stand-up, because that is, I feel like that's in my blood, and even if I never thought I would do it, I've wanted to do it for so long. So I almost feel like I'd be betraying myself if I just kind of stopped. But it is easy to kind of go. I don't want. I want to come home and watch Game of Thrones. I don't want to. I don't want
Because you have to go out late.
Yeah,
it's all these late nights with the stand-up.
And all, but also, yeah, that I just, it means writing more and stuff. So, but I still do it. I make sure that I get out there, and even if it's like, all right, look, tonight I don't have any new stuff that I'm really going to do, but maybe I'll do some really old stuff and see if I could do something with that or update it. But I always want to be working, and some weeks I don't do a set, and then I look up and okay, I'm doing a few sets this week, and but I can't not do it, and I still go out and work. I play club dates and do a week here and a week there and stuff. But there are some other projects that I'm working on, some other writing projects, and well, even now, like I have this podcast that I do with Kamau, and it was sort of a side fun thing that we were working on, and it sort of became bigger than we expected it to be, and I'm still writing stuff on my own, and stuff actually that we worked on together. So,
and the podcast, this is the Denzel Washington is the greatest actor of all time, period.
Yes, that is, yeah. I mean, that's the thing he and I used to just talk about all the time at home. I mean, we were roommates for a while, and so we thought, well, wouldn't this be ridiculous if we just talked about this for real? And it took off, and so, but I mean, the first thing for me is to do more stand-up, and it's kind of, I have a break coming up, and so typically when I've gone back to Los Angeles during our 5 or 6 week hiatus, I do some sets, and I also flit around and meet friends. There's a lot of brunches happening and things like that, and I've sort of made this commitment to go back and kind of just hole up and write as much as I can, so that when I come back to New York, I can kind of hit the ground running. Because I do feel like the New York stand-up scene it's been very kind to me in the relative short time that I've been here, and they're kind of hanging out with open arms, like, come on in, man, and so it's just up to me now to write more and put myself out there more, and I got some things in my back pocket in terms of writing, but like I can't not do another Thugs the Musical, or maybe it's
that was a short that you did.
Yeah, and so I want to do more of those. It's just a matter of making the choice to focus on this. All right, it's going to be this thing right now, or and right now I'm focusing on another, like a project that I'm sort of still working on with Kamau outside of the podcast, and I'll do that, and then I'll see what we can do with that, and then it's another thing that I sort of have in the back of my head, or that I've actually started working on, but I refuse to sort of drop the comedy or let my own voice go by the way. I love writing for these shows, and there's something about working all week and getting to the point even sometimes where you're like, what are we talking about? Like, what is this? This is nothing to, this is not what I would have ever thought I'd be interested in. But then writing it and figuring it out, and then seeing it, watching him do that live in front of the audience and stuff, and it's very rewarding and very exciting. And I maybe I'm greedy. I don't know. I don't want to give that up. I love doing that. But
and it also sounds like you're good at living in the moment, and you're enjoying what you're doing, but you're also still doing, keeping your foot in your own stuff.
I try to be, but I think I'm bad at living them. I think I'm always living. I have to sort of kick myself and stop myself from either looking too far back into the past or looking too far to the future without doing the work in the present. I've struggled with that, and with really focusing And
It seems like you're doing all right.
yeah, well, thanks. I hope so. But I more than ever I sort of feel dedicated to doing that because sometimes without trying, really exciting things happen, and then they make you go, well, holy shit, what if I really put the pedal to the metal and kind of so. That's my goal right now. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, you've created a lot of opportunities for yourself by living that way and doing that. It does seem to work for you.
I've tried. It takes it takes a while of just kind of wandering around in the desert of where is this going? What am I doing with this?
Right.
So, but the beauty of, I think, comedy, I hope this doesn't sound too cheesy, but it is the fact that you get beat up for a long time, and it's grunt work for a very long time, and then something comes out of that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be any fun if you just out the gate you were.
Yeah, everybody would be successful and everybody would
Yeah.
do it. Yeah, no, it's a special prize to win, to be able to do
Yeah.
it professionally.
Even if when you get that phone call, hey, we sold the show, you're just like, yeah, okay, great. There's still something very exciting, to carry that around with
Yeah.
you. So.
Yeah, well, I'm eager to see what new stuff you come out with next.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, me too.
It's been great talking with you.
You too, man. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks for listening to the How to Write Funny podcast. I'm Scott Dickers, here to tell you that if you liked what you heard, you can go leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and it'll make you feel good.